Is Irwin Zalkin of the Zalkin Law Firm, IRWIN ZALKIN. I'm here with my co-counsel Michael Barish, BARASCH of Barish McGarry here in New York. Thank you all for coming. We are announcing today that we will be filing 2 lawsuits on behalf of 2 victims, or I should say survivors, of sexual abuse, child sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witness organization. And that is thankfully due to the legislature and our governor passing the Child Victims Act, that our 2 clients, Heather Steele and Michael Ewing, have this opportunity. Now, most of you have probably heard about priest abuse and clergy abuse within the Catholic Church, but the Jehovah's Witnesses have been flying a little bit under the radar, and we want to make sure that that doesn't continue. Our law firm, the Zalkin Law Firm, has filed at least 24 lawsuits around the country, and this was probably the 25th and 26th lawsuits against the Jehovah's Witness organization, because this organization has allowed the sexual abuse of children to fester within its ranks for decades. And it has allowed it to happen because it is a very secretive and insular organization. And it's that the secretness of that organization that has allowed what I refer to as a crisis of silence. Child sexual abuse is pervasive and it is serious within this group. And these lawsuits are being filed, and in particular, to draw attention to the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses is like the Pope is to the Catholic Church. Their organization is headquartered in New York State. They are now in Tuxedo Park. They used to be in Brooklyn. And they manage the governing body. These 8 individual popes, if you will, are responsible for everything that happens within that organization. They call the shots. They dictate policies and procedures that are to be followed by all of the elders in some 14,000 congregations in the United States. Now, just to give you a sense of the depth and the breadth of the problem, in Australia, in 2017, a government-appointed royal commission investigated the Jehovah's Witnesses there, a population of about 67,000. And determined that there were 1,800 molested children and about 1,000 perpetrators. Now translate that to the United States, where we have, about 2 million Jehovah's Witnesses. Our firm discovered very early on in our litigation that the Jehovah's Witnesses maintain a database of known child molesters that dates back decades. At first, they lied to us in the reports and said they had no such database. But through persistence, we learned that they do in fact have a Microsoft SharePoint database that is searchable, and now they've been ordered to produce these documents. And they have refused court orders repeatedly, and to this day have never produced in compliance with court orders. They're taking the issue to the United States Supreme Court. We, of course, will be opposing it. Now, in the case of Michael and Heather, their stories are unfortunately too typical of what we see within the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they're going to tell you a little bit about their stories. Michael, who's 48, was sexually abused. 47? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put the order. 47, who was sexually abused when he was 14 years old, that carried on for about 3 years. His parents were very close. His father was an elder to another family, and the perpetrator was a ministerial servant which is equivalent to a deacon, more or less. And because of that close relationship, Michael Rust, this perpetrator, gained access to Michael Ewing, our client. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, so you know, they live in this sort of parallel universe. They believe that they live in what they call the truth. And the rest of us, we live in this outside world contaminated by Satan, and they find us to be what they refer to as bad association. So they don't really associate with the outside world other than what is necessary, of course, to go to work or go to school, but they are very insular and very close with each other, and they are taught since they're little children that they are to obey without question the elders and the leadership of their congregation, and certainly of the hierarchy of the organization. And you'll notice I keep calling it an organization. They do not call themselves a church. They do call themselves an organization. Go to jw.org. So Michael was molested by Mike Rust for 3 years. And at some point, when Michael was 21 years old, and he could no longer take the pain that caused him, the embarrassment, the shame that he was feeling, he disclosed that abuse. And the elders were advised of that. And they conducted their judicial committee, this tribunal that they conduct. And what was the result? Michael was disfellowshipped, which is the equivalent of being excommunicated. Why? Because at the age of 14, they considered that he had engaged in homosexual conduct and did no longer deserve to be a member of that religion or that organization. As was Michael Rust. They were both disfellowed. So Michael suffered punishment for what he experienced. Heather's family has a similar story. They were very close to Don Nicholson, who was an elder in her congregation in Wallsburg, New York. And the two families became very close. Her father was an elder and happened to also be a police officer. They spent a tremendous amount of time together, the two families. Nicholson had 2 children, 2 little girls of his own. What they didn't know in about 1979 or so, when the abuse started, she was 78, when she was about 2 or 3 years old, what her family didn't know is what the elders of their congregation knew, and that is that Don Nicholson was a pedophile. He'd abused his own daughters and others. All told, we know of about 18 women, girls at the time, who've been abused by this guy. At some point, when about 1982, someone else also reported Nicholson, and Heather and her family reported Nicholson. And they converged on the family, elders, what they call circuit overseers, who go around and they do a circuit on behalf of the watchtower and the organization, the hierarchy of the organization, and check on the different congregations. And they converged on the family and said, don't go to the police. Whatever you do, don't go to the police. Don't bring reproach upon Jehovah. God forbid. They didn't care about Heather. They didn't do anything. They disfellowshipped him. That means they excommunicated him. But they didn't tell anyone in the congregation why. They never do. They never do. The secret remains within a select few elders and the governing entities of the watchtower. They discouraged going to the police. Now, Heather's father was a police officer. He was very conflicted. What do I do? He was so indoctrinated by the belief that he went to the elders. He didn't go to the police. The police found out because her school found out. And they were mandatory reporters, as are the clergy of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're mandatory reporters, but they just don't do it. But the police did. And there was an investigation, and Nicholson was pled guilty and spent 3.5 years in prison. He's out. He's become a Jehovah's Witness again. He's been in the organization. He's been disfellowshipped, I think, 2, 3, maybe 4 times. She'll tell you the story. And despite the fact they've known of the abuse of multiples of young girls like this. So this story needs to be told. These lawsuits are going to tell this story, and I'm going to introduce Michael to you, and he's going to start and tell you a little bit about his story. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. I think you.
Oh yeah, I just want to. Hi, I'm Michael Barish. I'm local counsel, and I'm honored to be that. Thank you. I have to tell you, my firm has represented nearly 600 abused kids, and it's outrageous that it takes a lawsuit to bring justice to these people who in many cases have been waiting 20, 30, 40, in some cases 50 years. But we are going to make these people pay. We're going to get the answers that they deserve. I have to give Michael and Heather credit. You have no idea how brave you need to be to come and tell your story. We are not the story. They are the story. We're just lucky enough and thankful enough to be given the opportunity to get you guys the justice you deserve, and we will get the answers that you deserve as well. So Michael, why don't you get up and